Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is James. When two teenage boys you've raised, supported, and sacrificed for financially and emotionally make it clear that they see you as nothing more than a walking bank account, and their mother immediately takes their side, there's only one self-respecting response. Cut off every form of financial support and let the lifestyle they took for granted collapse. At the same time, you begin preparing to leave the relationship entirely. I had been married to their mother, Alexandra, for 13 years. For 10 of those years, I raised her twin sons as if they were my own, after their biological father went to prison. Despite everything I had done for them, the boys told me during an argument that I wasn't their father and was just a wallet, while Alexandra defended them. In that moment, standing in my own home, being disrespected by teenagers I had fed, clothed, and guided, I made the decision that would change everything. I met Alexandra when I was 29 and she was 31. We were both living in Phoenix and working stable professional jobs. I was a financial advisor at an investment firm, earning a solid income and building a reliable client base. Alexandra worked in office administration for a healthcare company. We met through a mutual friend who thought we would be compatible. The friend arranged a group dinner, and Alexandra and I ended up talking most of the night. We exchanged numbers afterward and slowly started dating. During the early months, Alexandra came across as mature, steady, and responsible. She seemed calm, reasonable, and grounded. After several disappointing relationships in my past, she seemed like someone with real partner potential. She told me early on that she had twin boys with her ex-boyfriend. At the time, the boys lived mainly with their biological father, who had full custody. Alexandra got them on weekends and during parts of the summer. I didn't see this as a red flag. In fact, I saw it as a positive situation. She had kids, so she understood family life. But she wasn't dealing with the daily strain of full-time parenting. For someone dating a parent, it felt like an ideal balance. We took our relationship slowly. We saw each other a few times a week, dinner dates, walks, weekend outings. Nothing rushed, nothing chaotic. We built something stable, step by step. During this time, Alexandra was supportive and affectionate. She supported my career goals, listened to my needs, and presented herself as dependable. She made me feel safe enough to invest emotionally and envision a future with her. We got married after dating for about 2.5 years. The ceremony was small, just close family and friends. The first 3 years of marriage were calm and straightforward. We both worked full-time. Evenings and weekends were predictable and comfortable. The twins visited now and then, but they didn't affect our daily routine much since they still lived with their father. About a year into the marriage, we started trying to have a child together. We both wanted to grow our family and assumed it would happen naturally and without much delay. But months went by with no pregnancy, then a full year, then more. Eventually, we grew worried that something might be wrong. We went through fertility testing, and the results showed issues on both sides. Conception was possible but difficult. The doctors recommended several treatments. The process was exhausting physically, mentally, and emotionally. I felt increasing pressure to give Alexandra a biological child, to prove I could be the husband and father she expected me to be. Each failed attempt chipped away at my confidence and strained the marriage. Around the 3rd year of our marriage, Alexandra's ex-boyfriend got into legal trouble. He was arrested on drug charges, convicted, and sentenced to several years in prison. That created an immediate custody crisis. He had been the primary parent. The twins were about 8 now, and they needed a stable home. Their father's parents, the boys' grandparents, were too old and too sick to care for them full-time. Alexandra asked if the twins could live with us. She said it would likely be temporary, just until their father got out or another arrangement was found. She made it clear she understood it was a significant request, but she had few alternatives. I took several days to think about it. It wasn't a decision to make casually. 2 young boys moving in would completely change our lives. I would become a father figure to children who barely knew me. At the same time, our attempts to conceive had been failing. The treatments weren't working. I started wondering whether this might be the path to the family we had been trying to build. That raising Alexandra's sons could fulfill the parenting role we wanted, but couldn't achieve biologically. I convinced myself it was an opportunity to do something meaningful, to be the father figure those boys needed, to support Alexandra during a crisis, to build the complete family we had been struggling to conceive. I agreed to let the twins move in with us. I told Alexandra I was committed to making it work, that I would treat them as my own, and that we would build a real family together. We rearranged the house to make space for them. We upgraded the spare bedrooms with new furniture and simple decorations. We bought new clothes, school supplies, and enrolled them in better schools in our district. We set up their rooms so they would feel welcome and comfortable. I invested heavily from the beginning, not only with money, but with time and emotion. I wanted them to feel safe and valued. I wanted to be a reliable father figure. I wanted a real relationship built on trust and respect. The boys were polite but distant at first. It made sense. Their father was in prison. They had moved into a new home with their mother's husband, someone they barely knew. New school, new neighborhood, everything in their lives had shifted. I tried to be patient. I spent one-on-one time with each of them, helped with homework, took them to activities they enjoyed, included them in family conversations and decisions. I made a genuine effort to connect. For a few years, things were mostly stable. The boys settled in. They did reasonably well in school, made friends, and joined sports and clubs. They had the typical experiences any child their age should have. I continued to invest in them without hesitation. I paid for everything. I never kept a tally. I simply provided because that's what fathers do. Alexandra worked, but her salary was small. I covered about 80% of the household expenses, including everything related to the boys. I never resented it. I saw them as my children, even though they weren't biologically mine. I believed I was building a family that would understand and value that commitment. Around age 15, their behavior changed sharply. They became more defiant and disrespectful. They ignored basic household rules, stayed out past curfew without explanation, talked back when never given instructions, ignored consequences entirely. I tried talking to Alexandra about it. I pointed out specific incidents and repeating patterns. I said we needed consistent discipline and clear boundaries. She scolded them, but only lightly. She gave warnings she never enforced. She blamed their behavior on being teenagers, normal rebellion, as she called it. Nothing changed because there were no real consequences. The boys pushed boundaries harder. They tested how far they could go. They challenged my authority directly, knowing Alexandra wouldn't fully support me. Then the school report started. Fighting with other students, bullying, disrespect toward teachers, dropping grades despite being capable. A clear pattern of deeper problems. I tried speaking to the boys about it. I talked about their choices, their behavior, and the long-term effects. They shut down completely, giving short answers. It was apparent they weren't interested in my guidance or my concern. The first major crisis came when the twins were 17. They were arrested for marijuana possession, and the police found enough on them to charge intent to distribute. The charges were eventually reduced, but the damage was done. I felt betrayed and humiliated. I had given them everything they needed. I tried to be a steady influence. I spent time, money, and energy supporting them. And despite all of that, they were selling drugs behind our backs. Alexandra immediately made excuses. She said it was peer pressure. She insisted it was a mistake, not a reflection of who they were. She downplayed the seriousness and rushed to defend them rather than hold them accountable. I wanted real consequences. I wanted them to understand the weight of their choices. I wanted a structured response that might actually change their behavior. Alexandra fought every attempt. She protected them from responsibility at every turn. The pattern became obvious. The boys saw me as someone they could use for financial support without any obligation to respect me. Alexandra fed that dynamic by siding with them in every conflict. To them, I wasn't a father or authority figure. I was a bank. When they turned 18 and started college, still living at home, they dropped any remaining effort to show respect. They came and went without telling anyone. They brought friends over without asking. They ignored every house rule. They spoke to me with open contempt. Meanwhile, I was paying for everything. Their full college tuition at a decent state university, their monthly allowances, their car insurance and gas, their phone bills, their outings and social lives. I was funding their entire lifestyle from top to bottom. They gave nothing back. They didn't work. They didn't help around the house. They didn't show gratitude. They acted as if all of it was owed to them, no matter how they behaved. The breaking point came one afternoon while I was reviewing the security camera footage from earlier that week. I had installed cameras at the entrances for a reason. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. That day, I saw footage of the boys bringing their father into my house. Their biological father was a man who had been released from prison only a few months earlier. They had invited him over without telling me. They let him into my home, into my private space, without my knowledge or permission. I felt violated. It was a complete disregard for basic boundaries. I confronted them that evening when they got home from classes. I showed them the footage and asked why they brought their father into my house without so much as a message. They immediately became defensive and aggressive. They started shouting that he was their father, that they had every right to see him, and that I had no authority to tell them who they could bring over. I tried to explain that this wasn't about banning anyone. It was about respect. You ask before bringing someone into another person's home. That's a basic consideration, not control. The argument escalated quickly. They stepped toward me like they wanted to fight. One of them pushed me, not enough to injure me, but enough to send a clear message. They were willing to get physical. I called for Alexandra, who had been upstairs. She came down with a tone that already implied I was overreacting. I explained everything: the footage, their father's visit, their aggressive behavior when confronted. Her response cut deeper than anything the boys said. She told me I was being unreasonable, adding that the boys should be allowed to see their father. Called me controlling. She sided with them completely, in my own house. Then one of the boys said the sentence that ended everything for me. "You're not our dad anyway. You're just a wallet with a pulse. A fucking ATM we have to tolerate." The other boy laughed and backed him up. Said I should be grateful they even acknowledged me, given how boring and controlling I was. Alexandra didn't correct them. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell them they were out of line. She just stood there looking uncomfortable, but silent, which told me everything I needed to know. I didn't shout or argue. I simply looked at the three of them for a moment, then walked to my home office and closed the door. I didn't speak to any of them for the rest of the day. I stayed in my office, processing what had just happened and what it meant for my life. That night, I opened my financial records. I calculated every dollar I had spent on them over the past 10 years. Tuition and fees, allowances, phone plans, car insurance, gas, their share of food and utilities, clothes and shoes, medical and dental bills, sports and activities, vacations, electronics, replacements for things they broke, the legal fees from their drug arrest. The total was staggering. 10 years of fully supporting them completely, without a single word of gratitude. In that moment, everything became clear. I had been used. They had never seen me as a father figure or as family. They saw me as a financial resource, nothing more. And Alexandra had allowed it, even encouraged it, instead of building a real family with me. I made my decision that night. I would no longer be their bank. All financial support would stop immediately. They would finally experience the consequences of treating me like a disposable ATM. By the next morning, I had already made every call that needed to be made. I contacted the university bursar and had my tuition payment authorization for both twins withdrawn. From that point on, they would either fund their own education or stop attending. I canceled their phone plans. I canceled the internet service at the house since they were the only ones using it. I stopped their monthly allowances. I ended their streaming subscriptions. I removed them from my car insurance. I shut down the emergency credit cards I'd given them. I did all of it quietly. No announcements. No warnings. I simply followed the plan step by step. At first, Alexandra tried to cover the gap. She used her income to pay for a few things, but she quickly realized she couldn't maintain the lifestyle I had been providing. Her salary wasn't enough to cover every other expense for 2 adult children. Tension filled the house almost immediately. The boys started feeling the consequences. They couldn't get online for gaming or streaming. Their phones were cut off. The allowances stopped. They had to ask Alexandra for money for everything, and she couldn't keep up. By the 3rd week, panic was setting in. They couldn't maintain their social lives. They couldn't go out with friends. They couldn't buy what they wanted. For the first time in their lives, they were being forced to budget, sacrifice, and live without constant comfort. They tried looking for jobs, but nothing they applied for paid enough to cover their expenses. They were finally facing real life without my financial support. By the 4th week, they came to me with apologies. They admitted they had been disrespectful. They said they understood how much I had done for them. They said they wanted to fix the relationship. But I had already detached completely. I looked at them without anger or sadness. I told them their words during the confrontation had been honest, and I was taking them at face value. They had described exactly how they saw me, and I was responding accordingly. They tried to backtrack. They said they were angry, but didn't mean it. They insisted they appreciated everything I'd done and wanted things to return to normal. I told them calmly that there was no normal to return to. They were adults. Adults take care of themselves. I was under no obligation to continue funding their lives. Their biological father was out of prison, but he couldn't help them either. He was working a minimum wage job and barely supporting himself. He had nothing to offer financially. Alexandra grew distant and defensive. She accused me of being cruel. She claimed I was destroying their futures over a single moment of disrespect. She blamed me for every difficulty the twins were now facing. I didn't react or argue, and I didn't bend either. She had chosen to side with them again and again. She had enabled their behavior. She had treated me as nothing more than a bank account, not a partner. Her position had been clear for a long time. Now mine was too. After about 6 weeks, I told the boys they had 90 days to move out. I made it clear that they were adults, that they needed to find their own place, and that I was done supporting them in my home. Alexandra immediately pushed back. She insisted they weren't going anywhere. She said this was their home, that I had no right to make them leave, and that she would never allow it. I didn't raise my voice. I simply repeated myself. They were moving out in 90 days, either willingly or through formal eviction. The decision was final. I also pulled Alexandra aside and told her privately that I was filing for divorce, that our marriage was over, that I could no longer stay with someone who constantly chose her adult sons over our relationship, enabled their disrespect, and fought me in my own house. She was stunned. She genuinely did not believe I would go through with it. She thought I was just angry about the money and that I would eventually give in and keep paying for everything. She had no idea how far past my limit I already was. But I meant every word. I contacted a divorce attorney, an experienced family lawyer, who explained the situation and began the formal process. Legally, it was simple. I had never adopted the boys. They were not my children. They were adults. I had no legal duty to support them or house them. Alexandra and I had no children together. We had tried to conceive, but it never happened. The only real task was dividing our marital assets. My lawyer filed the paperwork. Alexandra was served. At that point, the reality could no longer be denied. The boys eventually left. They moved in with their biological father, squeezing 3 grown men into a small 2-bedroom apartment. It was a dramatic downgrade from the comfortable, fully funded life they had with me. They also had to withdraw from university. Without tuition paid, and without wanting to take on loans, they couldn't stay enrolled. They lost their educational opportunities because they couldn't afford them, and I was no longer footing the bill. They kept sending me messages after they moved out. Long texts, long emails. Calling me heartless, selfish, wicked. Saying I had ruined their futures. Accusing me of betraying them after acting like their father for years. Claiming I was cruel for leaving them when they needed me. I didn't answer any of it. Their words didn't touch me anymore. I had detached completely. I saw them for who they really were, people who had used me for years while treating me with open contempt. Their anger wasn't about the loss of family. It was about losing access to what I provided. The divorce took around 8 months to finalize. Alexandra tried to fight at first, but she eventually realized she had no leverage. The house was in my name before we married. Most of the assets were mine. She got a settlement, but it was small. She tried several times to reconcile. She said I was making a mistake, that we could fix things, that her sons would do better if I just gave them another chance, that our marriage was worth saving. But I had finally seen things without excuses or emotion. I had acted as a father to boys who never saw me as anything except a bank account. I had stayed loyal to a woman who always chose them over me, who enabled their disrespect, and who benefited from the way they drained me. Walking away wasn't revenge. It was survival. It was admitting that I deserved better than a relationship built on financial dependence and disguised as family. The divorce became official on a Tuesday afternoon. I signed the papers. Alexandra had access to her settlement. We divided what needed to be divided. And just like that, the marriage ended, 14 years gone. Looking back now, after the divorce was finalized, everything is painfully clear to me. I learned that money doesn't create loyalty or respect. I assumed the boys would appreciate the support I gave them. I assumed they would value the stability, the opportunities, and the effort I invested. I thought acting like a father would make them see me as one. I was wrong. Financial support alone doesn't build a real relationship. Without respect and genuine affection, it becomes nothing more than dependence and exploitation. I learned that being a step-parent is nearly impossible without your spouse's full support. Alexandra never backed me when it came to the boys. That failure alone destroyed any chance of creating a functional family. Children notice every crack between adults. They learn how to exploit it. Without a united front, a step-parent has no authority and no real chance of building a meaningful connection. I learned that some people treat relationships like transactions. The boys and their mother saw me mainly as a source of resources. My usefulness was financial. My value was tied to what I could provide. The moment I stopped providing, I became irrelevant to them. That exposed the true nature of those relationships. I learned that staying in a situation where you're being used only extends the damage. I wasted 10 years hoping the boys would grow up and appreciate me. Hoping Alexandra would finally put our marriage first. Hoping the family dynamic would naturally improve over time. But exploitation doesn't turn into appreciation. Not without a significant change, and none of them ever tried to change. Most importantly, I learned that cutting off financial support is a valid boundary. I had no obligation to keep funding people who treated me with contempt. Pulling back resources wasn't revenge. It was the natural consequence of their behavior. Protecting myself financially and emotionally was the right thing to do. Some people say I was cruel for cutting the twins off so suddenly. They say they were just teenagers who said something stupid. That I should have given them more chances. That I ruined their future out of spite. But those people don't know the history. They didn't live through 10 years of disrespect and manipulation. They don't understand that "you're just a wallet with a pulse" wasn't an exaggeration. It was the truth of how they viewed me. They don't get that continuing to pay for people who treat you like that is the same as accepting abuse. Now, I'm in a completely different place. I still work as a financial advisor, but with firm boundaries I didn't have before. It feels calmer now, without the constant tension and resentment weighing on the walls. I haven't heard anything about Alexandra or the twins in over a year. I assume they're managing their own lives. The boys are in their early 20s now, old enough to stand on their own feet and support themselves. I feel no remaining attachment to them and no curiosity about how they're doing. They're simply people from my past who taught me costly lessons about boundaries, self-respect, and how easily generosity can be exploited. I deserved a partner who saw me as a whole person, not a financial resource. I deserved children who appreciated support instead of acting entitled to it. I wanted a family built on respect, not manipulation. Alexandra and her sons couldn't offer that, so I walked away. That's the story. Tell me what you would have done in my position. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, feel free to share it. Thanks for watching. Until next time.